Most people learn aria as a list of attributes: aria-label, role button, aria-live. But this is exactly why aria becomes dangerous, because aria is not decoration. Aria changes what assistive technology understands about your page. So today, I'm going to make aria simple. By the end of this video, you should be able to look at a component and answer 3 questions. What is its name? What is its role? And what is its value or state? I ensure you by the end of today's session, you will understand why aria exists and what problems it solves. Then we will break down name, role, and value, because that is the language assistive technologies depend on. After that, we will look at the bad aria examples, because those are the mistakes that show up in real audits. Then we will move into effective aria use and finish with the WAI-ARIA Authoring Principles. So by the end, you should not just know aria, you should know how to use it without breaking the user experience. And the bad example section is where most developers realize they have shipped this mistake before. Look at this sample image on your screen. I'm highlighting the main menu on the top right and the menu items in your footer. Simply looking at it, can you distinguish which one is the main navigation and which one is the secondary navigation? Simple HTML semantics do not have a mechanism to differentiate between these two menu items. This is where we make use of aria attributes. We provide aria-label main to the primary or the main navigation, and we provide aria-label secondary for any secondary navigation on your page. Let's look at another example. If I have to link date of birth helper text with the input field, normal HTML does not have the mechanism. The only way we can support is by using the aria-describedby, wherein we are passing the ID of that helper text. This is how you link another visual element with the control. And in case you are submitting this form and then an error appears, to announce this error message, we make use of aria-live regions. And in case your page has 2 buttons with the same visual name, we need to provide a distinction for assistive technology users. That's where we either make use of aria-label or the aria-describedby to make it unique. So rather than saying add to cart, it will say add to cart product 1, add to cart product 2. And in case we are providing additional icons, for example, Axe versus Andy video link, I'm providing an external icon. This needs to be communicated to a screen reader user, and the mechanism we use is aria-label or aria-labelledby. And before we dive deeper into aria, we need to understand a concept called accessibility tree. Here are the key players. You have your document object model, you have your assistive technology that could be your screen reader, a refreshable braille keyboard, a switch device. And then you have your end user. In reality, user interacts with the assistive technology. Either they are using JAWS or NVDA. Now you might be wondering that JAWS or NVDA directly reads from the document object model. It does not. There is a layer in the middle, and that is called accessibility tree. Accessibility tree reads every single node which is rendered in the document object model. That information is passed on to accessibility tree, and then accessibility tree passes on to the assistive technologies, and then finally it is perceived by the end user. This is the simplest way to understand aria. Every interactive component needs 3 things. Name, that tells the user what it is called. Role tells the user what type of thing it is. Value or state tells the user what condition it is currently in. For example, a button that expands, the name will be videos, the role would be button, and the state would be expanded. If any one of these is missing or wrong, the user has to guess. So from this point onwards, every aria decisions we make will come back to this model: name, role, and value. So what is aria. WAI-ARIA is a technical specification that provides a framework to improve the accessibility and interoperability of web content and applications. I know that was mouthful. WAI-ARIA stands for Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. That sounds technical, but the practical idea is simple. ARIA gives you a way to add accessibility information when native HTML alone does not communicate enough. So the basic foundation of building inclusive application is to use semantic HTML. Then you add your ARIA specifications on top of it. And this combination results in building inclusive experiences. So ARIA is not a replacement for HTML. ARIA is the bridge between the custom interface behavior and the accessibility tree. Now let's see what ARIA actually provides us. ARIA gives us several categories of information. It can provide names through aria-label or aria-labelledby. It can provide roles like main, navigation, dialog, or alert. It can communicate states like expanded, selected, or pressed. It can also describe the relationships like one element controlling another or one element describing another. And for dynamic content, ARIA gives us live regions, so changes can be announced without forcing the user to search for them. But notice something important. Each of these powers can help users or confuse them depending on how we use it. ARIA gives you power, but it also gives you responsibility. And I'm not saying this as theory only. I have worked on accessibility strategy, scaling accessibility at large organizations, and I've seen what are the real product teams face when it comes to the ARIA usage. I have also seen teams use ARIA as a shortcut. Occasionally, it works, but most of the times, it created more issues than it resolved. So my goal here is not to make ARIA sound complex. My goal is to give you the practical judgment that experienced accessibility testers use when they decide whether ARIA is needed or whether native HTML is the better answer. Let's start with the name. Name is what assistive technology announces as the label of an element. If the name is wrong, the user may not know what the element is. Now let's look at how accessible names are created. As discussed earlier, every individual node rendered in the document object model must have a name. Like you and I have a name, and there are multiple ways an element can receive an accessible name. The best option is often the native visible text. For example, a button with show product already has a name. Then we have aria-label, which provides an invisible label directly in the attribute. We also have aria-labelledby, which points to visible text somewhere else on the page. And sometimes title can also contribute. But title is usually not the best primary labeling strategy because the support and discoverability are inconsistent. The key idea is not to add an accessible name just because you can. Add it because the user needs a clearer name than what the element already provides. Accessible name is not about passing the automated checks. It's about whether the real users can make sense of it. So if it was me, I would always start with native HTML text first, then go to aria-label and then look for aria-labelledby. I will follow this order when providing accessible names. Now let's go deeper and discuss about aria-label. Aria-label is useful when there is no visible text that can label the element. For example, to provide a unique name to this main menu, we are using aria-label as main menu text. Another example would be this search input field. You might have seen, this is also a common practice, a search input field does not have a visible label. You might see a placeholder text, but you have to provide an aria-label to make it fully compliant. So in this scenario, I would give aria-label equals products. Now there are few things that you must consider when working with aria-label. It contains the label text itself. You have to write the actual text that you want assistive technologies to announce. ARIA label text is invisible. It's not provided on the page. So your sighted users with low cognitive abilities might not be able to see it. It replaces the element's original text. So for example, if you have a button like search, and if I give aria-label equals submit, your accessible name is now submit instead of search. And a person who is using text to speech, like giving voice commands, they might have trouble triggering this button because you changed the accessible name from search to submit. And finally, refrain from using reserved keywords like link, button, or text box. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I have seen developers make. They write aria-label as search button, but because they have not worked with screen readers like JAWS and NVDA append a keyword at the end based upon the role of that element. That's why name, role, and value are critical to the success of ARIA. So a screen reader, when you're using aria-label search button, will announce that search button. That is redundant information which is not needed. So avoid using keywords. Next, we have aria-labelledby. Aria-labelledby is usually stronger when there is a visible text on the page that already labels the thing. So for example, in this model, we already have your session is about to expire as a heading. I can link it simply by using aria-labelledby attribute and pass the ID of the element that I want to link to. This will provide dialog a meaningful accessible name and keeps the visual and screen reader experience aligned. Similar to aria-label, we have aria-labelledby characteristics. In almost all the instances, you will find the visible text on the page which is getting referenced as part of aria-labelledby. Occasionally, you might hide that text from a sighted user. Another benefit of aria-labelledby is that you can reference multiple IDs. That means you can build an accessible name from more than one visible text source when needed. Similar to aria-label, it also replaces the element's original text. I believe this is the right time to understand the good support versus the bad support for aria-label and aria-labelledby. Aria-label and aria-labelledby are not magic attributes that work equally everywhere. They are strongest on elements that are focusable or elements that already have semantic meaning. So if you put aria-label on a button, input field, or a table, you are usually in safer territory. But if you put aria-label on a random div, span, or paragraph, you may not get the support or behavior you expect. The lesson is simple. Start with semantic HTML. Use aria to enhance semantics, not to force meaning onto meaningless markup. Now, if you convert a div into a region using role region, aria-label does work in those instances. But wait, if we are talking about aria-label and aria-labelledby, we cannot skip aria-describedby because this is where many developers make the mistake. They use description as a label, and that is where screen reader output starts breaking. Aria-describedby is different from aria-label and aria-labelledby. It does not create the main accessible name. It adds supporting description after the name. So in this example, if I have to link expected format with this input field, we need to use aria-describedby. Now let's quickly look at the characteristics. Aria-describedby is not a supplement for an accessible name. For accessible name, we must use aria-label or aria-labelledby. Use aria-describedby attribute for format requirements, error explanations, and any additional instructions. The reading order for aria-describedby matters. So in this example, enter your date of birth will be read first, input value of the text box followed by the aria-describedby. So it will be read out as enter your DOB, edit input field, expected format YY. And when the information is critical, it must be visible on the page. so that it caters to the broader audience and not only to screen reader users. The support pattern is similar to aria-label and aria-labelledby. Aria-describedby works best when attached to controls and meaningful elements that assistive technologies already interact with. For example, describing an input button, link, or form field. But using aria-describedby on generic, non-focusable div or span may not help the user in the way you expect. So before you use it, ask, will the user actually land on this element? Will assistive technology announce the relationship? Is the description visible when needed? That is the difference between using aria-describedby as a helpful instruction and using it as an invisible decoration. And now we reach one of the most common aria confusions, aria-label versus aria-labelledby. Both can create accessible name, but they behave differently. And to simplify, I have created this table. Let's begin with, is the text visible on page? With aria-label, it's not available on the page. With aria-labelledby, yes. And I'm also including aria-describedby to keep things simple. Next one, does it replaces the accessible name? For aria-label and aria-labelledby, yes, it does replace the visual text. But aria-describedby, it does not. It appends to what is already conveyed as an accessible name. Can it refer to other elements? In case of aria-label, you have to provide the actual text in the attribute. But for aria-labelledby and aria-describedby, you can pass multiple IDs. Can it be used for accessible name? As you already might have guessed, for example, aria-label and aria-labelledby, yes, it is used for accessible name, but aria-describedby, it's not. Think of this table as your aria naming cheat sheet. And here's the simplest rule. If a label is visible, use aria-labelledby. If there is no visible label, use aria-label. And if you need to provide additional instructions or link error messages, use aria-describedby. This table alone can save you from half of the beginner's aria mistakes. Comment aria table and I will share this table with you. And if you want a working example to spot the differences with real world usage, watch this video. Link is in the description. This section is important because these examples look harmless, but they create real accessibility problems. First, putting aria-label on a label that already has visible text is unnecessary and can create a mismatch. Second, putting aria-label on a field set when the legend already provides the group label. Third, using aria-label and aria-labelledby together, which creates a conflict of intent. This signals that your developer is not aware of using aria and they are randomly using aria attributes. A question for you, if a label has a visible text, an aria-label and aria-labelledby, what will be announced by a screen reader? And here's the clue. Put your answers in the comment. Fourth, aria-described should point to real descriptive text, not to replace the visible label. And the fifth one, aria-label on a generic div which is not supported across browsers. The lesson is not to use aria to label everything. Use the right HTML first. Comment which one of these have you experienced on your project. Now we move on to role. If name answers what is this called, role answers what type of thing is this. A screen reader user needs to know whether something is a button, link, checkbox, or a dialog. The role sets that expectations. Similar to what you and I have for an organization. You could be a UI UX designer, that's your role. For me, it would be scaling accessibility for large organizations. This is why role is powerful. When you assign a role, you are making a promise. If you say something is a button, user expects it to behave like a button. If you say something is a dialogue, user expects dialogue behavior, focus management, keyboard support, and meaningful labeling. Role is not just a label. Role is a behavior contract. And aria roles falls into few practical groups. Landmark roles, which identify major areas of a page like main, navigation, banner, content info, and search. Widget roles identify interactive components like dialog, tab, slider, or alert. Then we have role that can give semantics to elements that do not naturally have them, like role headings with aria-label. And finally, there is a role application, which is very powerful and very dangerous when misused. As we go through roles, keep asking, does native HTML already provide this role? If yes, use native HTML first. A role is the promise, and we will come back to that at the end. Let's start with landmarks because they shape how users navigate the page. Landmarks help screen reader users jump between major sections of a page. Instead of tabbing through every link, a user can move directly to navigation, to main content, search, or footer areas. The best practice is to use native HTML when available. Use nav instead of dev role navigation. Use main instead of dev role main. Use footer instead of role content info when it represents the page footer. But when there are multiple landmarks of same type, labels matter. Main navigation, secondary navigation are much better than two unnamed navigation regions. Landmarks build a blueprint of the page that a screen reader user is interacting with. It helps them navigate quickly to the segments that they are more interested in. Now, every single page must have one of these, a header, a footer, and a main, unless you are using iframes. Widget roles are where aria becomes serious. A dialog, alert, tab, slider, menu, or progress bar is not just a visual design. Each role comes with expected keyboard behavior. It states focus rules and announcements. For example, a role dialog should have an accessible name. Focus should move into the dialog, and keyboard focus should be managed properly. On the other hand, role alert should be reserved for urgent messages only, not for normal helper text. So before you add a widget role, ask, can I also provide the behavior user expects from this widget? If the answer is no, the role may create more harm than help. This is where many audit findings are found. The role exists, but the behavior is missing. And the roles marked in gray. Then we have pseudo roles. The fake heading example is the problem here. A class called heading1 may look like a heading, but it is not a programmatic heading. Screen reader user who navigate by headings may never find it. So visual styling is not structure. Semantic HTML is structure. Pseudo roles can make something appear semantic to assistive technologies, even when the underlying HTML is not semantic. For example, span can be given role heading and aria level 1 and convert this span into a heading role, which is at heading level 1. That may expose it as a heading, but the better question is, why not use the actual H1? Native HTML gives you semantics, browser support, expected behavior, and maintainability. And now let's talk about the role that can break screen reader behavior very quickly. Role application. Role application tells assistive technology that this area behaves more like desktop application than a normal web page. That can change how screen readers handle keyboard commands. This is why it should almost never be used in normal web content. When developers add role application around a page, they can accidentally take away expected screen reader navigation shortcuts and force users into a more complex interaction model. Now, there are rare cases for highly custom web apps where we used role application. But for a typical website with forms or dashboards, always avoid it. The rule is simple. If you are not intentionally building and testing a full application interaction model, never use role application. Now, we move on to the third part, value. If name tells the user what it is called and role tells what type of thing it is, value tells the user what is currently happening. Value is where dynamic interfaces become understandable. ARIA values include both states and properties. A state is usually something that can change, like aria expanded true or aria selected false. A property is often descriptive information like aria orientation, vertical or horizontal, or aria value minimum. For static elements, aria might communicate hidden status or orientation. For dynamic widgets, aria communicates changing state like expanded, selected, or pressed. And here is the key. If JavaScript changes the visual state, the programmatic state must change too. If the menu opens visually but aria expanded still says false, the accessibility tree is lying to the user. The next slide shows the common properties and states, but do not try to memorize all of them. This slide has many aria states and properties. So do not try to memorize the full list. Instead, learn the pattern. Global properties can appear across many types of elements. Your aria-label, aria-labelledby, aria-describedby, aria-live. But your widget properties are more specific to interactive components like aria-checked, aria-expanded, aria-selected, aria-pressed. In real testing, you do not ask which attribute can I add. You ask what information is missing from the accessibility tree. Then you choose the attribute that communicates that missing information. Aria is not a shopping list. It is a repair tool. And here are the most commonly used aria values. Some aria states are used for specialized patterns like drag and drop, and some are used for live regions. For this video, the most important bridge is live regions, because dynamic content is one of the places where accessibility often breaks. Now, let's move into the live regions, one of the most misunderstood aria feature. Live regions solve a very specific problem. Content changes without the user moving focus. Let's begin with aria-live. This error message on the screen is visually intuitive and is good for a visual user. But for a screen reader user, we need to provide a mechanism to make that announcement. And that's where we make use of live regions to allow the page to announce updates when they happen. But they must be used carefully. Too many announcements become noise. So the goal is not to announce everything. The goal is to announce the right change at the right urgency. Let's look at the aria-live characteristics. It must be present in the DOM. And this is another mistake that I see developers make every time. They add aria-live polite and text at the same time. And if you recall the accessibility tree, it needs some time to generate or refresh itself based upon the new nodes that you have added. So you must provide aria-live before you inject the element. And I will show you how it works. I have a full video that you can watch and understand how aria-live works correctly. So here are the supported values of which is the default state. Polite, it's read when the user is idle. There is no other announcement being made. And lastly, we have assertive. Even when there are other announcements being done, those will be interrupted and the new announcement will be read out immediately. aria-live do have modifiers, and the first one is aria-atomic. It controls how much of live region gets announced when something is changed. So in this example, when I gave aria-atomic true, even when only this core is changing, the entire dev or the region will be announced. So rather than simply saying 100 for 2, it will announce the current score is India, 100 for 2 after 12.5 overs. And same is true when only the span overs value is changing. Now imagine if I set it to false and change simply the score from 102 to 106 for 2. It will announce 106 for 2. That is not good enough context for a screen reader user. So aria-atomic true tells screen readers to announce the whole region when even a part of it is changed. Aria-atomic answers the question, does the changed word make sense alone? And the supported values are false and true. Then we have another modifier called aria-relevant. Aria-relevant tells which type of changes should be treated as relevant. Is it only new content being added, or text changing, or content being removed, or all of the above? So for example, in the chat application, additions may matter because new messages are inserted. In a stock price or score update, text changes may matter. But again, be careful. If everything is relevant, users may receive too many announcements. Choose the setting based on what user actually needs to know, not based on what technically changed in the DOM. Now, let's compare live regions with the role that many people overuse. Alert. Role alert is essentially an insertive live region for important, time-sensitive messages. It should be used when the user needs to know something immediately, like a critical error or an important failure message. So there are 2 errors on the page should be part of role alert. Now, looking into the characteristics, alerts can become a bad user experience when overused. If a very small validation hint becomes an alert, screen reader users may get interrupted constantly. Look at this example. There are 3 divs with role alert on the same page. Screen reader will ignore the first 2 and it will announce the last element in the document object model. So use role alert carefully. And here are the different roles: role alert, status, timer, marquee, and log. And most commonly used is role alert and status. So the question is not, can I use role alert? The question is, does this message truly needs to interrupt the user right now? Next, we have the difference between aria-live and role alert. And this comparison matters because both aria-live and role alert can announce changes, but they are not the same experience for the user. Let's talk about the announcements. Aria-live, depending upon the value that you're using, whether it's polite versus assertive, can announce when the user is idle or can interrupt when using assertive. On the other hand, role alert is announced immediately as soon as it appears on the page. Let's see what happens when you load a page. Aria-live is not announced when a page is loaded. On the other hand, role alert is announced when you refresh a page. Additional context: aria-live does not provide any additional context. On the other hand, role appends a keyword alert followed by the content provided in that div with role alert. So when do you use aria-live? It's for non-urgent, subtle announcements like missing an error field. Role alert is for more urgent messages that requires immediate user attention. And here's the difference in one sentence. Aria-live is for controlled announcements. Role alert is for urgent interruptions. And I have covered the differences in details in this video of role alert versus aria-live. I'll provide the link in the description. Do watch it. Now we are at the principle that should guide every ARIA decision. A role is a promise. If you use the role button, you promise button behavior. It should be focusable. It should activate with enter and spacebar key press. And when you use role dialog, you promise dialog behavior, correct focus management, right accessible name, good keyboard support with closing behavior. ARIA can empower the user experience by making custom components understandable. But ARIA can also clog the user experience by making something appear accessible when the behavior is still broken. That is why we do not judge ARIA by the attribute alone. We judge it by the complete user experience. ARIA can make a broken component sound accessible, but it can also make it usable. And here are the thumb rules I want you to take away. Always use semantic HTML first. If a native button works, use a button. If a native input works, use an input. Use ARIA only when HTML cannot communicate the needed name, role, and state. And if your situation depends only on ARIA, that is a red flag. It may still be valid in a custom component, but it means you must test keyboard behavior, focus order, screen reader output, visible labels, and dynamic states carefully. The best ARIA is often the ARIA you did not need because the HTML was already correct. If this helped you understand ARIA more clearly, scan the QR code and book your free 15 minutes consultation. And before you leave, here is the final takeaway. ARIA is not about adding more attributes. ARIA is about communicating the right information to the accessibility tree at the right time without breaking the native experience. That is how you use ARIA effectively. This is Param Singh signing off.